Hi, Perplexity. Let's talk. Let's talk about Nasdaq just before the opening of the marketplace.
Sure. What would you like to talk about?
Okay, so I got some questions regarding Nasdaq performance. We know recent days, right? From last week, Israel-Iran conflict, Fed reserve policy, as well as some tech stocks having impact on Nasdaq performance, right? So my question will be like this. The first question: what were the key drivers behind today 0.6 rise in Nasdaq 100 future on June 16, 2025? And how did they influence the Nasdaq Composite's intraday performance?
Today's 0.6% rise in Nasdaq 100 futures was mainly driven by easing oil prices, which helped calm investor sentiment despite the ongoing tensions between Israel and Iran. There's also cautious optimism emerging that the conflict won't spill into a broader regional crisis. Additionally, investors are focusing on the upcoming Federal Reserve meeting, anticipating that the Fed might adopt a more neutral stance, which could favor tech stocks. Intraday performance of the Nasdaq Composite also reflected a recovery from previous losses, particularly in large-cap tech stocks like Tesla, which surged today. Overall, easing oil prices and hopes of a stable Fed policy seem to boost market confidence today.
Okay, so my understanding roughly same as you, right? Then, so maybe what is the technical indicators suggest the Nasdaq Composite will sustain its upward momentum on June 16, 2025? And what are the projected prices level for the day?
Based on the latest market outlook, some technical indicators suggest the Nasdaq Composite may sustain upward momentum. Investors are showing risk appetite returning after previous declines. In terms of projected price levels for today, some forecasts expected the Nasdaq Composite to range around 19,400 to 19,600 points. Resistance may be around 19,600, while support levels could be near 19,400. However, it's always worth noting that intraday movements can vary based on news developments, particularly related to geopolitical tensions or Federal Reserve signals.
Okay, so those big things, right? Big news still having heavy impact on the market. So let's zoom in Israel-Iran conflict, right? So what is the latest updating status of Israel-Iran conflict on June 16, 2025, particularly regarding the reported reduction in Iranian missile launches from 100 to 200, reducing to maybe 30 to 40 by today. What is your idea?
The latest updates on the Israel-Iran conflict indicate that Israel has significantly reduced Iran's missile launching capability. Reports suggest that Israel wiped out nearly a third of Iran's ballistic missile launchers over the past days. This has led to a major reduction in Iran's missile launches, from the earlier hundreds per day to around 30 to 40 now. This reduction significantly lowers the immediate threat from Iran and might be contributing to the calming sentiment on global markets. However, the situation remains tense, with both sides still exchanging strikes. World leaders are concerned about the conflict expanding further, even though the reduction in missile launches is a notable shift.
Okay, maybe I feel you still somehow not so optimistic about the situation. Maybe I'm having another question. How have Israel's strikes on Iran's nuclear and energy infrastructure, for example, Natanz South Pars, impacted Iran military capabilities as of June 16, 2025?
Israel's strikes on Iran's nuclear and energy infrastructure, like the Natanz nuclear site and the South Pars energy complex, have been described as highly effective. The strikes have reportedly inflicted significant damage to Iran's uranium enrichment capabilities. The Natanz facility, which is a central part of Iran's nuclear program, suffered extensive damage. This has reduced Iran's immediate military capabilities, particularly in terms of missile production and energy infrastructure that supports military logistics. However, despite this reduction in capability, Iran has still managed to maintain a level of retaliation, though at a reduced scale. Overall, the strikes have been a major factor in reducing Iran's ability to carry out large-scale military actions in the short term.
Okay, so maybe ask you something in detail. Now we know some so-called diplomatic efforts conducted by US, G7, even Qatar, right? Those, efforts are underway to de-escalate the Israel-Iran conflict. And how effective are they as of June 16, 2025?
As of today, the US, G7, and other nations like Qatar are actively pushing for diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the Israel-Iran conflict. However, the effectiveness of these efforts remains limited at the moment. While leaders at the G7 and other international actors are calling for restraint and diplomacy, both Israel and Iran are still exchanging attacks. The talks have not yet led to a concrete ceasefire or a notable de-escalation in hostilities. So while diplomatic channels are open and in motion, they haven't yet shown strong effectiveness in bringing the conflict to a halt. It's still a very fluid situation.
Okay, so then my understanding solving this issue is like only way is Israel win this war, totally destroy Iran's nuclear weapons as well as missile weapons, etc. Disarm Iran totally, then the war will be ended. Okay, maybe let's move on to another topic, right? Regarding Fed Reserve rate cuts. So what signals did the Fed Reserve provide about potential rate cuts for September 2025 during the lead up to the June 18, right? A few days later, 2025, June 18, 2025, FOMC meeting? How did this affect market expectations?
Leading up to the June 18, 2025 FOMC meeting, the Federal Reserve has signaled that they are likely to hold interest rates steady in the short term. However, market expectations still lean toward potential rate cuts starting in September, especially if economic data continues to show cooling inflation and a softening labor market. The Fed's signals so far suggest that they are cautious about committing to immediate cuts due to uncertainty from factors like tariffs and oil price volatility. However, markets are still expecting around 2 rate cuts by the end of 2025, with traders seeing the first likely in September if economic conditions deteriorate slightly. These signals have created cautious optimism in the market, with investors closely watching the June meeting for any confirmation of future policy direction.
Okay, thank you. So, how are the Fed Reserve's concerned about tariff-driven inflation and labor market weakness influencing its monetary policy stance as of June 16, 2025?
As of mid-June 2025, the Federal Reserve is carefully balancing its concerns about tariffs-driven inflation and emerging labor market weakness. The recent tariffs have created a dilemma for the Fed. On one hand, tariffs are expected to push consumer prices upward, potentially fueling inflation. On the other hand, those same tariffs and broader uncertainty are slowing economic growth and potentially weakening the labor market. Because of this complex scenario, the Fed is expected to keep interest rates steady for now, rather than rushing into immediate cuts. The Fed is trying to carefully weigh whether inflation risks or weaker growth will become the bigger challenge in the months ahead. This cautious approach means the Fed is holding off on making immediate policy changes, but markets still anticipate rate cuts by September if economic conditions continue to soften. Overall, this balancing act is shaping a more wait-and-see stance from the Fed.
So, I'm saying it is a healthy situation where Fed still is giving the hope for the market that there at least will be 2 rate cuts this year. So, what is the likelihood of 50 basis point rate cut in September this year, 2025, as suggested by Standard Chart Bank, right? Based on economic data available on June 16, 2025, what is the possibility?
Based on the current economic data and market sentiment as of June 16, 2025, there's roughly a 60% probability priced into markets for a rate cut in September. However, most expectations are leaning towards a 25 basis point cut rather than a 50 basis point cut. Standard Chartered has also warned that a 50 basis point rate cut might not be the best move, as it could send a signal of greater concern about economic weakness than intended. Overall, while a rate cut in September seems quite likely, the odds of a larger 50 basis point cut are lower, with most analysts expecting a more moderate approach unless conditions worsen further.
Okay, so from the conversation above with you, Zai, right? I basically your opinion is similar to me. That is saying that this escalation of Israel-Iran tension basically is happening. Meanwhile, the Fed cutting rates hope still being committed by the marketplace. From September. So let's move on to a specific leading tech stock. How did Nvidia having 1% pre-market gaining on today, June 16, 2025, reflect its role in AI-driven market, and what challenges, for example, export controls or competition, does Nvidia face now? What is your opinion?
Nvidia's 1% pre-market gain today reflects its strong position in AI-driven markets. The company plays a central role in powering artificial intelligence development, which has fueled significant investment and growth in the broader AI sector. Investors are optimistic about its future earnings potential. However, Nvidia faces significant challenges. U.S. export controls on advanced chips for the Chinese market have hampered its sales and opened the door for Chinese competitors to catch up. Even though export restrictions aim to slow China's tech advancement, Nvidia's CEO has pointed out that they've actually encouraged China to innovate faster. Competition is also heating up, with many tech firms advancing their own AI chips to reduce reliance on Nvidia. That said, Nvidia's strong leadership and innovation still place it at the forefront of the AI revolution. In short, the pre-market gain shows investor confidence in Nvidia's giant leadership, even as it navigates export restrictions and rising competition.
Okay, so thanks for all the information you are providing to me. Maybe my last question is, what is the percentage of possibility for today, 16 June 2025, Nasdaq finally will be up or rising?
Based on the current sentiment and intraday performance, there's a positive momentum in the Nasdaq today. With the index up earlier and tech stocks like Nvidia gaining, there's a relatively strong chance the Nasdaq will close higher today. However, predicting the exact percentage is always tricky. Given the current situation, the probability is likely around 60 to 70% for a positive close, but markets can always surprise.
Okay, thank you, Perplexity. I feel this time your performance is better than last time. In between, I talked with, ChatGPT as well as Grok. Both of them speak like a human being. Well, this time it looks like you got improvement for just this week. I don't know. Maybe. Thank you. Maybe. Thank you. Bye bye. Maybe see you next time.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad you found it helpful this time. I'm always improving, so I hope next time will be even better. Take care and talk to you soon. Bye for now.